it's Bobby. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back. Before we get into today's video, I just want to apologize for being MIA. I'm not ghosting y'all, I promise. Life has been life, and we've had some things going on that have been ridiculously insane. But anyway, let's jump into today's video. Today's video is all about how I do our weekly budget, okay? How we do our weekly budget is, I have a weekly budget insert that I made in Canva. It's two-sided, but it's upside down. You know, kind of like my meal plan, so I can just flip it and, you know, keep the current page in the front. I also have a fold-out calendar that I made. I don't remember where I made this. I don't know if it was in Canva or something else. I'm not sure, so sorry. I just edit this every month to change the month and then move around the bills that are due. Also on Fridays, I have our income categories, like our sources of income. So Robbie is my kid. You know, he's an adult. He has a job. He pays rent to live here. You know, it's not a whole lot, but it's just enough to teach him, you know, how to budget money. And then, then I have my income. I have two sources of income. One is the engineering firm and one is my full-time payroll gig. And I'm paid every 2 weeks with each of them, but they're on staggering weeks. So that way I have an income coming in every week. And my husband is paid weekly. So I typically do our weekly budget on Wednesdays because I can see everybody's pay stubs on Wednesdays. So I know, and like my kids' stuff is the same every week. You know, that doesn't change. But, I can see everybody's pay stubs on Wednesdays, so then I can write down the income, and then while I'm there, I'm like, okay, well, let me just go ahead and do, the budget. So, this calendar folds out, you know, like this, so I can see the full month. Like I said, I'm not showing you the income section, but you can see our bills. So today is the 22nd, so we're like right here, okay? So what we've got coming up this week, so I look ahead. Payday is the 24th? Yeah, so I'll look this week to see what we've got coming up. We only have 2 bills coming out this month, or this week, so I need to account for those, all right? So, like, I already know what's coming out, and I just write them down on my weekly budget. So I'll explain the sections of this insert as we go. All right, so I'm just gonna move this over here. So typically what I do, on Wednesday I will write the date for Friday. So Friday's date is 7/24/26. The starting balance, that's what we've got left in our checking account as of Friday, you know. So, and then I write down our income. So at, you know, the first 3 lines. So it would be Robbie rent, and then it's going to be Billmar, that's the engineering firm that I work for, and then my husband's company. So, and then I just write in the amounts over here. I know what they are, but for the purposes of this video, I'm not writing them down. So then I would skip a line, and then that's where I start writing our expenses. Okay, so I've got my blasted student loan, one of them, $49.20, and then we've got Capital One of $122. And our electric bill is also due like 2 days after we pay our rent. So, and y'all, our rent is like over $1,400 a month. So, I try to pay the electric bill as early as I can to avoid having to pay 2 large bills back to back. Last month, our electric bill was like $173. This month, it's $331. There should be a law against these power companies being able to essentially price gouge you because they raise their rates during the summer and the winter when obviously you use more electricity to keep cool and to keep warm. It's just taken advantage, and it does not sit well with me. It doesn't, I don't like that. But anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and put our electric bill down here. It's $331 and some change. I'm just gonna put 331 dot. Oops, I just poked a hole in my paper. Anyway, so I'm gonna put that. I'll just fill in the change later. Typically, I would just normally round up like the 332. And then what I do is I total up our income, I total up our expenses, and then I write them down here at the bottom. So, but also in our expenses, I write down gas and groceries. All right, gas, I budget $100 for that, and that's gas in the car, the vehicles. So I don't go anywhere. I mean, I have to take my kids to an appointment once a week. So a tank of gas could probably last me like a month. My husband doesn't work very far from home, so he fills up probably once every 2 weeks. So, but I still budget $100 a week for gas because you never know when something's going to happen. Groceries, this is what really pisses me off. I budget $250 a week for groceries. It used to be our budget for groceries, like I was looking at it the other day, over time, it went from like $140, and then it went up to $200, and now it's $250. It seems like, doesn't matter what I buy from the grocery store, it's $250. It really irritates me. So anyway, that's what I do. So it's the bills, and then it's gas, and then it's groceries. If, obviously, we're not going to use $100 worth of gas this week, so we got a little bit of wiggle room. Because my husband and I have decided to make $1,000 our zero. Okay, so our goal is to always keep $1,000 in our checking account. Just because you never know when shit's going to hit the fan. So, and that's just what works for us. I'm not telling you guys how to do anything. I'm not a financial advisor or an accountant or anything like that. This is just what works for us. Okay? So, like right now, we're sitting at above zero in our checking account, which is amazing, because rent is due next week. So, what I'm going to do is I'll write in the starting balance, and then that way I know what we're working with. I'll add the income together, and I'll put total income down here. I add the expenses together and put total expenses down here. Now, this remaining balance, the remaining balance is only the difference between the income that's brought in this week and the expenses that go out this week. It does not include anything from the starting balance. Nothing. Okay? So that's just there in case, like, income is short or expenses are greater than expected. I know what we've got to pull from. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we dip below our zero and, of 1,000, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. That's why it's there. But then, we work hard to get back to that $1,000 is our zero. Okay? So, once all this is done, I have my total income, we got our total expenses, and then the remaining. Then the remaining essentially gets added to or subtracted from the starting balance, because that's what we're going to have left in the checking account after this income has been accounted for and these expenses have been paid. And I do have a checkbook register insert from SM Plans that I use. This is what it looks like. So I just use my check register like a normal check register. Whatever the date is, the description, and I put a plus or minus before the amount. And this column right here, this little box between description and amount, that's what I use to check it off. So, like, once it's come out of the bank, it gets checked off. If it hasn't come out of the bank, nothing goes there, until it's cleared the bank. Because that way I know what's left to come out and what's already been processed. So anyway, that's how I do our weekly budget. It's quick, fast, and it's accurate, So, and we're always like a week ahead, So like the electric bill, that's not due until like the 5th, I think. But like I said, we've got rent, and our internet bill comes out the same day as rent. And then I've got a student loan, which is, $160 that comes out after that. So, that first week, it's rent, electric, internet, and my $160 student loan, because I have 2 different ones that I'm paying on. So, I like to keep ahead as much as possible. So that's it. I would love to know, like, what works for you guys. Do you guys just use apps, which is cool? I can't. I'm a visual, like, hands-on kind of person, so I have to write it down. And things got really tight with us the beginning of this year, like really, really tight. And that's when I started doing this. Like, my husband lost his job at the beginning of the year, and with the job market the way it is these days, like, everybody's hiring, but nobody's hiring. Does that make sense? So it took him a couple of months to get back to work, and it was just my income, and it was hard. It was freaking hard, but we did it. We did it. So, but anyway, that's what prompted me to, to get back to doing this. I used to do this before, like in my first life when I was married the first time. But, I hadn't worried about it too much, with my current husband, because we just never had to. Everything was on auto pay, but when he lost his job, we really had to reevaluate some things. But anyway, so that's how I do my budget. I would love to know what works for you guys. Do you guys have like a zero, like a cushion that you keep in your account? Do you do sinking funds? Do you do like the cash envelope system? I really want to know, because I'm always open to new things, new ways of doing things. But all right, so that's going to be it for me today. I will, like I said, there's new changes coming to the channel, so hopefully, well, not hopefully, I'm going to make a point to post more regularly, and post some different kinds of stuff. So anyway, I hope you guys have been well, and until next time, bye.